My daughter-in-law called me a pest. When I told my son, he said, "You have to apologize." "I'd rather lose my mother than lose my wife." I smiled and replied, "Great, now pay for everything yourselves." I canceled their $65,000 wedding, took back my house, and sold the car. Moments later, I heard a scream outside my door. I want you to ask yourself this. What would you do if the people you loved most called you a pest for caring about them? How far would you go to teach ungrateful children the true value of what they've taken for granted? Today's story follows Eleanor Graves, a 58-year-old woman who discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is show someone exactly what life looks like without you. If you've ever felt undervalued, taken for granted, or dismissed by the people who should love you most, we share these life-changing stories every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now let me tell you about the day Victoria's world shattered and how she turned that destruction into the most brilliant revenge plan you've ever heard. But fair warning, this story will make you think twice about how you treat the people who sacrifice everything for you. Let's begin. My name is Eleanor Graves, and at 58 I thought I had mastered the art of being a mother. I was wrong about many things, but I was absolutely right about one. Children can be the coolest creatures on earth, especially when they forget who gave them everything. The morning that changed my life forever started like any other Wednesday in my pristine Silverwood Heights home. I was arranging white payas in my crystal vase, the same Waterford crystal my late husband Richard had given me for our 20th anniversary. The morning light streamed through the bay windows of my Tudor-style estate, casting everything in that golden glow that photographers spend fortunes trying to recreate. I had always prided myself on creating beauty. At 58, I still turned heads when I walked into a room. My platinum blonde hair was styled to perfection, my skin maintained through years of disciplined skincare, and my figure preserved through daily yoga and careful eating. Richard used to say I was the most beautiful woman in any room, and even 3 years after his passing, I believed him, but beauty, I was about to learn, means nothing to ungrateful children. My daughter Isabella was getting married in 6 weeks. At 28, she was stunning in that effortless way that comes with youth, but she had inherited more than just my looks. She had inherited my determination. Though hers had been warped into something entitled and cruel, for the past 8 months I had been planning and funding what was shaping up to be the wedding of the century, a $65,000 extravaganza at the Grandwood estate where Richard and I had been married. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated. The imported Italian roses, the hand-calligraphed invitations, the designer dress that cost more than most, people's cars, the symphony quartet I had flown in from New York. All of it was my gift to my daughter, my way of showing her how much I loved her. That morning I was reviewing the final seating arrangements when my phone rang. Isabella's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with the warm smile I always wore when speaking to my children. "Good morning, darling. How are the final dress fittings going, Mom?" Her voice was sharp and patient. "We need to talk about the wedding." "Of course, sweetheart. What can I help you with?" "It's about the guest list. You invited the Weatherbys." I paused, setting down my pen. The Whitmore family were old family friends, people who had known Isabella since she was a child. "Yes, dear. Margaret and I have been friends for 30 years. I thought, well, uninvite them." The words hit me like a slap. "I'm sorry." "What? You heard me. Adrian doesn't like them. He thinks they're boring old people." And honestly, I agree. This is supposed to be a young, fun wedding, not some stuffy old person party. I felt my carefully composed smile falter. "Isabella, these are people who watched you grow up. Margaret was at your baptism, your confirmation, your graduation. Mom, stop being such a pest about this. It's my wedding, not yours. Either uninvite them or I will. And I won't be nice about it." Pest, the word rang in my ears like a bell tolling. After everything I had done for her, after every sacrifice, every dollar spent, every sleepless night I had spent planning her perfect day, I was a pest. "Isabella, I think you're being unreasonable. These people love you. God, you're so annoying. You always do this, trying to control everything. You can't just let me have what I want without making it about you and your stupid old friends." I closed my eyes, feeling something cold settle in my chest. "I see, do you? Because I'm starting to think you don't get it. This is my wedding, my day. And if you can't respect that, then maybe you shouldn't be involved at all." The line went dead. I sat in my perfect kitchen, surrounded by the perfect life I had built, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart that had been broken before and healed. This was something deeper, something that had been holding my world together. An hour later, my son Daniel called. At 30, he was the golden boy, Harvard-educated, working at a prestigious law firm, living in the house I owned, and let him use rentry. He had Richard's dark hair and my blue eyes, and when he smiled he could charm anyone into anything. That morning his charm felt like acid. "Hey Mom, Isabella called me about the wedding thing." "Did she? Look, I think you need to apologize to her. She's really upset, and with the wedding so close she doesn't need this stress. I sat down my coffee cup with deliberate precision. She called me a pest, Daniel, for trying to include people who love her in her wedding. Come on, Mom, you know how brides get. She's just stressed. The mature thing to do would be to apologize and move on. The mature thing, yeah, look, I know you mean well, but sometimes you can be a little intense about family stuff. Just say you're sorry, uninvite whoever she wants you to uninvite, and everything will be fine. I stared out at my perfectly manicured garden, at the roses Richard and I had planted together, at the life we had built for these children. And if I don't, Daniel's voice changed, became cooler. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Isabella is my sister. She's getting married once, hopefully. And I want her to be happy. If that means choosing between keeping peace with her and keeping peace with you. He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I see, I said quietly. So you're saying I should apologize to her for being called a pest. I'm saying you should be the bigger person here, and if I'm not, there was a pause, and when he spoke again his words cut through me like a knife. Then, I'd rather lose my mother than lose my sister. I'd rather lose my mother than lose my sister. The words echoed in the silence of my empty house. These children for whom I had given up my career, my dreams, my entire identity, these children who lived in homes I provided, drove cars I bought, attended schools I paid for. These children who had never known a moment of want or need because I had sacrificed everything to give them the world. And they would rather lose me. I smiled then, a slow, cold smile that would have terrified anyone who knew me well enough to recognize it. Great, I said softly into the phone. Great. You'd rather lose your mother than lose your sister. Message received loud and clear, darling. Mom, that's not what I owe, but it is exactly what you meant. And you know what, Daniel, I think that's a wonderful idea. From now on, you can have everything exactly the way you want it without your pest of a mother interfering. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my kitchen, feeling something new coursing through my veins. Not heartbreak this time, not grief or sadness, or the desperate need to fix things, power. For the first time in 30 years of motherhood, I felt powerful. I picked up my phone and dialed my wedding planner. Jennifer, it's Eleanor Graves. I need you to cancel everything. Yes, everything. The entire wedding. Cancel the venue, the flowers, the caterer, the musicians, all of it, Mrs. Hale. The wedding is in 6 weeks. We'll lose all the deposits. I don't care about the deposits. Cancel it all. And Jennifer, if my daughter calls you, refer her to me. Next, I called my property manager. David, it's Victoria. I need you to serve an eviction notice on the Willow Lane property. Yes, I know my son lives there. 30 days notice effective immediately. Then I called my insurance company to remove Daniel's car from my policy, followed by the dealership to inform them that the vehicle would be repossessed by end of business. Each phone call felt like removing a weight from my shoulders. Each canceled service, each withdrawn support, each severed financial tie was a small victory. When I was finished, I poured myself a glass of my best champagne, the doming that Richard and I had been saving for Isabella's wedding, and walked out to my garden. The afternoon sun was setting behind the oak trees, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in the distance I could hear the sound of children playing, their laughter floating on the evening breeze. It was the sound of innocence, of joy untainted by entitlement or cruelty. My children had lost their innocence long ago. I realized somewhere between private schools and trust funds, between designer clothes and exotic vacations, they had learned to see love as obligation and generosity as weakness. But they were about to learn a very different lesson. I raised my champagne glass to the setting sun and whispered the words that would define everything that came next. So be it. The first screen came at exactly 7:23 the next morning. I was in my yoga studio, moving through my daily sun salutation routine, when I heard Isabella's voice pierce the morning silence like a banshee wail. Through my window I could see her standing in my circular driveway, still in her pajamas, holding her phone and shrieking at the sky. I completed my pose with perfect form, breathing deeply as I had been taught, and walked to the window to get a better view of the show. Isabella was pacing now, her blonde hair wild around her shoulders, gesticulating wildly as she spoke into her phone. Even from a distance, I could see the tears streaming down her face, the complete breakdown of the composed young woman who had called me a pest less than 24 hours ago. My phone began ringing. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, then again. On the 4th call, I finally answered, my voice perfectly calm and pleasant. Good morning, darling. The word was more scream than greeting. What did you do? I'm sorry, dear. You'll have to be more specific. I've done quite a few things this morning. I made myself a lovely breakfast, did my yoga, watered the orchids. The wedding, what did you do to my wedding? I smiled, settling into my favorite armchair with my morning tea. Oh, that I can let it. The silence on the other end was so complete I wondered if the call had dropped. Then came a sound I had never heard from my daughter before. A low keening wail that sounded like an animal in pain. You can-led my entire wedding. Every last detail, the venue, the flowers, the food, the music, even the photographer. I called everyone yesterday evening, quite efficient really. I'm rather proud of how organized I was about it. But the deposits, the contracts, all forfeit, I'm afraid. Turns out wedding vendors don't like last-minute cancellations. Who knew? Another silence then. But why? Just because I asked you to uninvite some people. I set down my teacup with a delicate clink. Oh, sweetheart, it wasn't about the weather bees, though I must say, calling me a pest for wanting to include people who love you was rather illuminating. I didn't mean of course you did, and your brother made it even clearer when he said he'd rather lose his mother than lose his sister. Well, congratulations, darling. You've both gotten exactly what you wanted. Mom, please. I was just stressed about the wedding. You know how crazy everything has been. Was crazy. Past tense. There's no wedding to be stressed about anymore. I could hear her hyperventilating through the phone. You can't do this. You can't just destroy everything because your feelings got hurt. Actually, I can. It was my money funding your little fairy tale, my connections securing your venues, my reputation guaranteeing your vendors. And since I'm apparently just a pest who interferes too much, I thought I'd remove myself from the equation entirely. Adrian is going to kill me. His parents are going to think I'm completely irresponsible, aren't you? The question hung in the air like a blade. What? Aren't you completely irresponsible? You're 28 years old, Isabella. You work part-time at a boutique that barely covers your shopping habits. You live in an apartment I pay for, drive a car I bought, and just yesterday you were planning a wedding funded entirely by money you never earned. So tell me, dear, what exactly about that situation suggests responsibility? First, and now you'll have the opportunity to prove just how responsible you can be. I'm sure Adrian will understand when you explain that you'll need to postpone the wedding until you can afford to pay for it yourselves. We can't afford a wedding like that. It would take years to save up that kind of money. Then I suppose you'll have a long engagement. How romantic. Mom, please. I'm sorry I called you a pest. I was wrong. But you can't punish me like this over one word. One word. Oh, sweetheart. This isn't about one word. This is about a pattern. A pattern of entitlement, disrespect, and taking for granted everything I've given you. Yesterday was just the final straw. My other phone line began ringing. Daniel's name appeared on the caller ID. Oh, look at that. Your brother is calling. I should probably take this. He might have some interesting news to share. Mom, don't hang up. Goodbye, Isabella. I hope you have a lovely day figuring out how to be responsible. I switched to the other line. Hello, Daniel. What the hell is wrong with you? His voice was pure fury. None of the charm he usually deployed when he wanted something from me. Good morning to you, dear. I trust you slept well in your lovely home. You know damn well I didn't, since I got an eviction notice slipped under my door at 6:00 a.m. 30 days to vacate. Are you out of your mind? Not at all. I'm clear-headed that I've been in years. This is insane, Mom. You can't just throw me out of my house because you're mad about some stupid family argument. Your house? I laughed, and the sound surprised even me with its coldness. Darling, it's my house. My name on the deed, my money that purchased it, my generosity that allowed you to live there rent-free for the past 3 years. I've been taking care of it. I've been maintaining the property value. How noble of you. I'm sure the new tenants will appreciate all your hard work. I've already had David list it for rent at market rate. Turns out I can get $3,200 a month for it. Who knew? $3,200, Mom. I can't afford that kind of rent on my salary. Then I suppose you'll need to find somewhere more within your budget. Have you considered roommates? I hear that's quite common for people your age. People my age who don't have trust funds and family money. Ah yes, about that I've also had a chat with my financial advisor about your trust fund. Fascinating conversation, really. Did you know that as the settler of the trust, I retain certain discretionary powers? I can modify the distribution schedule under specific circumstances. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. You wouldn't. Oh, but I would, and I have. Your monthly distributions have been suspended indefinitely, pending a review of the trust purposes and your conduct as a beneficiary. You can't do that. There are laws. There are indeed laws, and I followed all of them. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have good lawyers and unlimited time to read the fine print. A car door slammed outside my window, through the curtains. I could see Daniel striding up my driveway, his face twisted with rage. I'm at your front door, he said into the phone. I can see that. Let me in. We're going to settle this right now. I don't think so. Mom, open the door. No, I watched him try the handle, then begin pounding on the mahogany door Richard had specially imported from Ireland. The sound echoed through my pristine foyer, but I remained seated in my chair sipping my tea. I'm not leaving until you fix this. Then you'll be there for quite a long time. I suggest you call an Uber. An Uber? My car won't start. Oh yes, that I had it repossessed this morning. Turns out when you stop paying the insurance and inform the dealership that the registered user is no longer authorized to possess the vehicle, they're quite efficient about collection. The pounding stopped abruptly. You had my car repossessed. Technically, it was never your car. The loan was in my name, the insurance was on my policy, and the payments came from my account. I simply reclaimed my property. How am I supposed to get to work? The same way millions of people do every day. Public transportation, ride shares, walking, biking. Really, the options are endless. This is crazy. You've lost your mind. On the contrary, I found it. For the first time in 30 years, I'm thinking clearly. Through the window, I watched him sink down onto my front steps, his head in his hands. For just a moment, he looked like the little boy he used to be. The one who would cry when he scraped his knee and run to me for comfort. But that little boy had grown into a man who would rather lose his mother than lose his sister. That little boy had died somewhere between Harvard and entitlement, and I was finally ready to bury him. Mom. His voice was smaller now, plaintive. Please, I didn't mean what I said yesterday. I was just trying to keep the peace by throwing me under the bus. That's not what I was doing, isn't it? When forced to choose between supporting your mother and appeasing your sister, you chose Isabella. When asked to stand up for the woman who gave you everything, you told me to apologize for being called a past. That's not keeping the peace, Daniel. That's cowardice. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're sorry you're facing consequences. There's a difference. I stood up and walked to the front door, pressing my hand against the wood that separated us. On the other side, I could hear him crying, actually crying like he hadn't done since he was a child. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live, I said loudly enough for him to hear through the door. I suggest you use them wisely. Mom, please. Goodbye, Daniel. I walked away from the door and didn't look back. By noon, my phone had rung 17 times. Isabella called 6 times. Daniel called 8 times, and Adrian, Isabella's fiancé, called 3 times. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drove to the Grandwood estate for lunch. The maitre greeted me with his usual warm smile. Mrs. Hale, how lovely to see you. Will you be dining alone today? Yes. At the usual table by the window. The dining room was full of the usual crowd, wealthy women my age discussing their children's accomplishments and their husbands' business deals. I had been part of this world for over 30 years, had helped plan their charity galas and attended their dinner parties, had listened to them complain about ungrateful children and demanding spouses. Victoria Margaret Weatherby approached my table, her face creased with concern. I heard about the wedding. Is everything all right? I smiled. Serenely. Everything is perfect, Margaret. Isabella has decided she needs to take more responsibility for her own life. Very mature of her, really. But the invitations went out weeks ago. Young people today change their minds so quickly. I'm sure everyone will understand. Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. She had known me long enough to recognize when I was hiding something, but she was too polite to press. Well, if there's anything David and I can do to help. Actually, there is something. You mentioned that your nephew is looking for a rental property. I have a lovely house that just became available. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, beautiful garden, very reasonable rent for the right tenant. Oh yes, he'd be very interested. Daniel isn't. Daniel is moving on to bigger and better things. Growing up, you know it's time. I spent the next hour fielding similar conversations, each one an opportunity to control the narrative. By the time I left the club, the story was already spreading through our social circle. Victoria Hale's children were finally becoming independent. How wonderful for them. How proud she must be. No one questioned why a mother would suddenly withdraw support from her children. After all, wasn't that what good parents did? Taught their children to stand on their own 2 feet. That evening, I sat in my garden with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. My phone sat silent beside me. Apparently, my children had finally gotten the message that I wasn't taking their calls. The silence was intoxicating. For 30 years, I had organized my life around their needs, their schedules, their crises. Every decision had been filtered through the question of how it would affect them. Every opportunity one had passed up, every dream I had deferred, every sacrifice I had made, all for children who saw me as nothing more than a past. Well, pests could be exterminated. As the last light faded from the sky, I made a mental list of everything else I needed to do. Closing credit cards, canceling phone plans, removing them from insurance policies. The infrastructure of support I had built around their lives was vast and complex. Dismantling it was going to be even more satisfying than building it had been. I raised my wine glass to the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. 2 new beginnings, I whispered. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. Then another scream pierced the night air. Isabella again, I thought. Apparently, she had just discovered something else I had canceled. I smiled and took another sip of wine. The night was young, and I was just getting started. The beauty of a well-connected social life is that information travels faster than wildfire, and reputation is everything. After 30 years of carefully cultivated relationships in our affluent Silverwood Heights community, I had built a network that could destroy or elevate someone with a few well-placed words. It was time to put that network to use. 3 days after cutting off my children's financial support, I began phase 2 of what I had started thinking of as my educational program. If they wanted to be independent, they would learn exactly what that meant, not just financially, but socially. I started with Isabella. Thursday morning, I placed a call to Cecilia Grant, Adrian's mother. Patricia and I had moved in the same circles for years, though we had never been particularly close. She was old money, the kind of woman who pronounced her words with crystalline precision and judged people by their bloodlines. Under normal circumstances, I found her exhausting. Today, she was perfect for my purposes. Patricia, dear, it's Eleanor Graves. I hope I'm not calling it a bad time. How lovely to hear from you. I was just thinking about the wedding. Patricia and I are so looking forward to it. Yes, well, that's actually why I'm calling. I want to speak with you personally before the gossip mill got hold of the story. There was a pause. Cecilia Grant lived for gossip, but only when she was the one controlling it. What story, dear? I sighed, injecting just the right note of maternal concern into my voice. I'm afraid Isabella has decided to postpone the wedding. She's been having some difficulties lately. I've been trying to support her through this challenging time, but I thought you should know what's been happening. Difficulties? What kind of difficulties? Well, I don't like to air family business. But since your family is involved now, Isabella has been struggling with some very impulsive behavior. Financial irresponsibility, emotional outbursts, unrealistic expectations. Yesterday, she screamed at me in my own driveway because I suggested she might want to contribute something to her own wedding costs. Every word was technically true, just framed in a way that made Isabella look unstable rather than entitled. Oh my, Patricia murmured. Adrian hasn't mentioned anything. He's such a sweet boy trying to protect her. But I'm concerned that she's not ready for marriage. The wedding planning process has been challenging. Isabella has been making demands that frankly seem quite unreasonable for someone who isn't contributing financially to the event. I see. I've decided to step back and let her handle the wedding arrangements herself. If she's ready to be a wife, she should be capable of managing her own wedding, don't you think? That seems wise. I just wanted you to hear it from me before you heard some garbled version from someone else. You know how these things get twisted. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Cecilia Grant was many things, but discreet was not one of them. By evening, half the Grandwood estate would know that Isabella Hale was having difficulties and that her own mother had concerns about her readiness for marriage. Next, I called Olivia Park, whose boutique employed Isabella part-time, and where Isabella had been hoping to secure a full management position. Monica, it's Eleanor Graves. I wanted to thank you again for giving Isabella the opportunity to work with you. Oh, Victoria, she's such a lovely girl. We've actually been discussing expanding her role. I'm so glad to hear that. I hope you'll keep me posted on how she does with increased responsibility. Between you and me, I'm a little concerned about her ability to handle pressure right now. Concerned? She's been under a great deal of stress with the wedding planning, and I've noticed some concerning behaviors, mood swings, unrealistic expectations, difficulty accepting feedback. I'm hoping that more responsibility at work might help her develop better coping skills. I hadn't noticed any problems. She's very good at putting on a brave face, but I thought you should be aware in case you see any signs of instability. The last thing I'd want is for her personal struggles to affect your business. Monica was quiet for a moment. I appreciate you telling me this, Victoria. Of course, we mothers have to look out for each other, don't we? The third call was to Laura Benson, whose husband sat on the board of the charity, where Isabella had been volunteering and hoping to secure a paid position. Amanda was a notorious gossip, which made her perfect for spreading carefully crafted concern about my daughter's stability. Amanda, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to discuss Isabella's volunteer work with the Children's Literacy Program. She's been wonderful, Victoria. So enthusiastic. I'm glad to hear that. I do hope her recent challenges don't interfere with her commitment to the program. Challenges. She's been going through a difficult period, some financial stress, relationship pressures. I've been trying to help her work through some impulsive decision-making patterns, but I worry about her ability to maintain consistent commitments right now. Oh dear, is everything all right? I'm sure it will be once she learns to take responsibility for her choices. I just wanted to make sure you knew to keep an eye on her reliability. Young people sometimes bite off more than they can chew, don't they? By the time I finished my calls, I had planted seeds of doubt about Isabella's stability and reliability in the minds of 3 influential women who would spread those concerns throughout our social circle. None of it was slander. I had been careful to express only motherly concern and share observations that were technically accurate. But the effect would be devastating. For Daniel, I chose a different approach. My son prided himself on his professional reputation and his connections in the legal community. He had worked hard to build relationships with senior partners and potential mentors, relationships that could make or break his career trajectory. I started with a call to Jonathan Wells, the senior partner at Daniel's firm. Harrison and Richard had been golfing partners for years, and he had always treated me with the respect due to a major client's widow. Harrison, I hope you have a moment to chat. I wanted to thank you again for taking such good care of Daniel. Of course, Victoria. He's a bright young man with a lot of potential. I'm so glad you think so. I must admit, I've been a little concerned about him lately. Concerned? He's been under some financial pressure, nothing serious but enough to affect his judgment. He's always been so responsible. But lately, I've noticed some concerning choices, impulsive spending, risky decisions. I'm hoping that increased responsibility at work might help him develop better discipline. I see. I don't want to interfere in his professional life, of course. But I thought you should know that he's been dealing with some personal challenges. I'd hate for any of that to spill over into his work performance. Thank you for letting me know, Victoria. I'll keep an eye on things. The beauty of these conversations was that they accomplished multiple goals simultaneously. They planted doubts about my children's competence and reliability, while also positioning me as the concerned mother, trying to help them through difficult times. Anyone who heard these stories would see me as supportive and reasonable. While viewing Isabella and Daniel as unstable and irresponsible, my phone rang as I was finishing lunch. Isabella's name appeared on the screen. Hello, dear Mom. Something weird is happening. Adrian's mother called in this morning asking if I was okay. She said she heard I was having some kind of breakdown. How strange. I can't imagine where she would have gotten that idea. And Monica at the boutique pulled me aside today, asking if I was dealing with too much stress. She seemed different, like she was watching me for signs of crazy or something. Perhaps people are just concerned about you after the wedding postponement. You did have quite a public meltdown in my driveway. I wasn't having a meltdown. I was upset because you destroyed my wedding, sweetheart. The way you tell the story and the way others perceived it might be 2 different things. Neighbors talk, you know. What are you saying? I'm saying that actions have consequences, and sometime, if you enjoyed this story, please support me by liking, sharing and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much. As those consequences ripple outward in ways we don't expect. There was a long pause. Mom, did you say something to people? I've spoken with several friends who asked about the wedding. Yes. I told them you had decided to take more responsibility for your own life. I thought that was a positive way to frame it. What exactly did you say? The truth, dear. That you're going through some growing pains as you learn to be more independent. That you're dealing with the stress of adult responsibilities. All perfectly normal things for someone your age. But the way you're saying it makes it sound like what? Like I'm falling apart. Are you? Another long pause. I need to see you. We need to talk about this face to face. I'm afraid I'm busy for the next several days, but I'm sure things will work themselves out. Mom, I have to go, dear. Take care of yourself. I hung up and immediately called Margaret Weatherby. Margaret, it's Victoria again. I just got off the phone with Isabella and I'm even more concerned than before. She's becoming quite paranoid, accusing me of spreading rumors about her. I think the stress of adult responsibility is really affecting her mental state. Oh, Victoria, how difficult this must be for you. It is. I keep hoping she'll mature out of this phase, but I'm starting to worry that it might be something more serious. Keep her in your prayers, would you? Of course, dear, and Victoria, you're handling this with such grace. Not every mother would be so patient. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Adrian. We need to talk. I ignored it. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. Through the people, I could see Adrian standing on my front porch. His usually perfect hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. He looked like a man who had been having a very bad day. I opened the door with my warmest smile. Adrian, what a lovely surprise. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning my pristine foyer as of seeing it for the first time. Mrs. Hale, I need to understand what's happening with Isabella. Please call me Victoria. We're practically family after all. Would you like some tea? No, thank you. My mother called today asking if Isabella was having some kind of mental health crisis. My boss mentioned that he'd heard she was unstable. 3 different people asked me if I was sure I wanted to marry someone who was going through difficulties. I guided him into my living room, gesturing for him to sit in the chair across from mine. How concerning. People do love to gossip, don't they, Victoria? With all due respect, this isn't random gossip. These are specific concerns that seem to be coming from people who know your family well. I settled into my chair and studied him carefully. Adrian was intelligent. That had always been one of his more attractive qualities. Under different circumstances, I might have been proud to call him my son-in-law. Tell me, Adrian, in the time you've known Isabella, would you say she's demonstrated good judgment and emotional stability? He blinked, clearly not expecting the question. Yes, of course. Really? Think carefully. Has she shown the ability to handle stress calmly, to make responsible financial decisions, to consider other people's feelings when making choices? His mouth opened and closed. I could see him thinking back over their relationship, reassessing moments he had perhaps previously overlooked. She couldn't be impulsive, he said slowly. Impulsive, that's a kind way to put it. But that's just she's young, she's passionate. She's 28. Adrian, how long are we going to excuse poor behavior as youthful passion? Mrs. Hale, Victoria, I love your daughter. I'm sure you do. But love isn't always enough, is it? Marriage is a partnership that requires maturity, responsibility, and mutual respect. Tell me honestly, do you think Isabella is ready for that level of commitment? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. 2 days ago I would have said yes without hesitation, he said finally. But watching how she's handled this wedding situation, the screaming, the blame, the complete inability to take any responsibility for her own actions. Go on. And the money thing, I always knew you were generous with her, but I didn't realize how completely dependent she was. When you withdrew your support, she fell apart completely. She can't even conceive of funding her own wedding. And that doesn't concern you. Of course it concerns me, but I thought it was just because the wedding was so elaborate. I didn't realize she can't actually afford anything she has. I leaned forward slightly. Adrian, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. If you marry Isabella, are you expecting to inherit a life of financial support from me? His face flushed red. I would never. I'm not accusing you of being a gold digger. I'm asking if you're prepared to build a life with someone who has never learned to support herself. She could learn, could she? Or would it be easier for her to find someone else who would take care of her the way I always have? The question hung in the air between us like a sword. I think I said gently that you need to have some very serious conversations with my daughter about what your marriage would actually look like. Not the fairy tale version funded by my money, but the real-world version where 2 people build a life together through their own efforts. He stood up abruptly. This is all because she called you a pest, isn't it? I smiled sadly. Oh, Adrian, if you think this is about one word, then you understand even less than I thought. Then what is it about? It's about 30 years of sacrifice being dismissed as interference. It's about children who think love means never having to say thank you. It's about the fundamental disrespect of taking someone for granted. So you're destroying her life to teach her a lesson. I'm removing myself from her life because she made it clear that's what she wanted. Everything else is just her learning to live with the consequences of her choices. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment when he understood the full scope of what I had done. You're not going to fix this, are you? There's nothing to fix, dear. This is exactly what Isabella and Daniel asked for. After he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my garden, watching the last light fade from the sky. My phone buzzed with text messages, Isabella begging me to call her back, Daniel demanding I stop this madness, Adrian asking if we could meet again to discuss finding a solution. I turned off my phone and enjoyed the silence. Tomorrow I would make more calls. I would plant more seeds of doubt, share more carefully worded concerns, and watch as my children, social and professional networks, began to view them with suspicion and weariness. They had wanted independence. They were about to discover exactly how dependent they had been, not just on my money, but on my reputation, my connections, and my protection. And this was only the beginnings. By the end of the first week, the Whisper campaign was working better than I had dared hope. The beauty of high society is that reputation is everything, and once doubt is planted, it spreads like a virus through seemingly casual conversations. I was having lunch at the Grandwood estate with my usual Tuesday group when Cecilia Grant approached our table, her face wearing that expression of concerned superiority that wealthy women perfect over decades of suffering. Victoria, dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right with Isabella's young man? I sat down my fork and looked up with practiced innocence. Adrian, as far as I know, why do you ask? Well, yesterday at the tennis club, I overheard him on the phone having what sounded like a rather heated argument. something about money and expectations, and whether someone was marriage material. I couldn't help but wonder if perhaps the engagement isn't as stable as it appeared around the table, for other women leaned in slightly. Nothing drew their attention quite like the scent of relationship drama in their social circle. "How concerning," I murmured, though I suppose it's natural for young couples to have disagreements when they're facing adult realities for the first time. "Adult realities?" asked Margaret Weatherby, who had been unusually quiet since learning about the wedding postponement. "Well, the wedding cancellation has forced them to confront some difficult questions about their future. When you take away the fairy tale trappings, sometimes couples realize they haven't actually discussed the practical aspects of marriage," such as Patricia's eyes gleamed with barely concealed hunger for gossip. "Oh, the usual things. Who pays for what, whose family they'll spend holidays with, how they'll manage their finances." Isabella has always been rather sheltered from those kinds of concerns. The women around the table exchanged meaningful glances. In our social circle, being sheltered was code for spoiled and unprepared for real life. "I'm sure they'll work it out," said Jennifer Morrison. Though her tone suggested she thought no such thing. "I hope so," I replied, sighing delicately, though I must admit I'm concerned about Isabella's ability to handle conflict. She's always been rather dramatic when things don't go her way. That afternoon, I received a call from Monica Churn at the boutique. "Victoria, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to discuss Isabella's performance here at the shop." "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Well, that's what I'm trying to determine. Yesterday, she had what I can only describe as an emotional outburst with a customer who questioned the price of a handbag. And this morning she was over an hour late because, according to her, she couldn't find her car keys." I made a sympathetic noise. "The stress of the wedding situation has been very difficult for her." "I understand that, but I'm concerned about the pattern. She's been increasingly unreliable, and frankly some of her behavior has been quite unprofessional. I'm wondering if perhaps she needs some time off to sort through her personal issues. That might be wise. Sometimes young people need to hit bottom before they can learn to manage their own lives." "Hit bottom?" "I mean that sometimes it takes real consequences for people to develop maturity and self-discipline." After the call ended, I smiled to myself. Isabella was about to lose her job, and it would be framed as her own failing rather than my manipulation. My phone rang again. This time it was Jonathan Wells from Daniel's law firm. "Victoria, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to touch base about Daniel." "Of course, Harrison. Is there a problem?" "Not a problem, exactly, but I've noticed some concerning changes in his behavior. He's been distracted, sometimes comes in looking like he didn't sleep well, and yesterday he made some basic errors on a brief that he should have caught." "Oh dear, I was afraid something like this might happen." "Afraid? Daniel has been under a great deal of stress lately. He's been forced to confront some financial realities, and I think it's been quite a shock to his system." "Financial realities? He's had to learn to live within his means for the first time in his life. It's been educational but also challenging. Sometimes when young people are suddenly faced with real-world pressures, it affects their performance in other areas." "I see. Do you think this is temporary, or should I be concerned about his long-term reliability?" "I believe Daniel has the potential to be an excellent lawyer, Harrison, but he needs to learn some life lessons first. Whether he rises to the challenge or crumbles under the pressure remains to be seen." That evening, both of my children showed up at my door at the same time. Through the peephole, I could see them standing on my front porch, clearly having arrived in Isabella's car, a small Honda that looked particularly shabby next to my Mercedes in the driveway. They both looked terrible. Isabella's usually perfect hair was pulled back in a Bessie ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that suggested she had given up on maintaining appearances. Daniel looked like he hadn't slept in days, his suit wrinkled, and his tie asked you. I opened the door with a warm smile. What a lovely surprise. "Please come in." They followed me into the living room, both of them moving with the defeated posture of people who had been beaten down by circumstances beyond their control. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee, wine?" "Mom," Isabella's voice was small and tired, "we need to talk." "Of course, dear, please sit down." They perched on the edge of my sofa like birds ready to flee at the first sign of danger. "This has to stop," Daniel said, his usual charm completely absent. "What has to stop?" "You know what. The whisper campaign, the reputation destruction, the systematic dismantling of our lives." I tilted my head innocently. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to us." Isabella exploded, then immediately seemed to shrink back into herself. "Please don't pretend you don't know exactly what you're doing. I'm living my life, dear, just as you both made it clear you wanted me to do. Living your life doesn't include telling everyone in town that we're unstable and irresponsible." Daniel said, "Have I said you're unstable and irresponsible? You've implied it. You've planted seeds and let other people draw their own conclusions. And what conclusions have they drawn? Isabella started crying. Not the dramatic sobs of our first confrontation, but the quiet, defeated tears of someone whose spirit was breaking. Adrian is questioning our engagement, she whispered. His mother thinks I'm having a nervous breakdown. I lost my job today because Monica thinks I'm too emotionally volatile to work in customer service, and my boss is considering whether I'm reliable enough for the partnership track. Daniel added, 3 different clients have asked to be reassigned because they heard I was dealing with personal instability. I studied their faces, seeing the genuine pain and confusion there. For just a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. I'm truly sorry to hear you're struggling, I said carefully. Growing up is never easy. Growing up, Isabella's voice cracked. You're destroying our lives. I'm not destroying anything, sweetheart. I'm simply no longer protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. What choices? Daniel demanded. What did we do that deserve this? I sat down my teacup and looked at both of them directly. You chose to treat me with disrespect and contempt. You chose to take my love and generosity for granted. You chose to dismiss my feelings and my contributions to your lives. And when I called you on it, you chose to double down rather than apologize. I'm apologizing now, Isabella said desperately. We're both apologizing. Please just make it stop. Stop what exactly? Stop talking to people about us. Stop spreading rumors. Stop sabotaging our relationships and our careers. I haven't spread any rumors. I've simply shared my honest concerns about your well-being with people who asked your honest concerns. Daniel's voice was sharp. You're not concerned about our well-being. You're punishing us. Can it be both? The question settled over them like a shroud. What do you want from us? Isabella asked finally. I want you to understand what you threw away when you decided you'd rather lose your mother than show her basic respect. We didn't mean, yes you did. You meant every word, and now you're living with the consequences. So what happens now? Daniel asked. You just keep destroying us until we're completely ruined. I smiled, and I could see from their expressions that the sight of it chilled them. Oh darling, I'm not destroying you. I'm educating you. This is what life looks like when you don't have a safety net. This is what happens when you have to stand on your own merits rather than relying on family connections and protection. But we can't, we don't know how. Then you'll learn or you won't. Either way, it's no longer my responsibility. They sat in silence for several long minutes, and I could see them trying to process the scope of their situation. If we, Isabella, started then stopped. If we did everything you wanted, would you fix this? What do you think I want? For us to grovel, to beg forgiveness, to admit we were wrong. And are you wrong? Another long silence. Yes, Daniel said finally, we were wrong. We were disrespectful and ungrateful, and we took you for granted, and we're sorry. Isabella added, we're really truly sorry. I nodded thoughtfully. I'm sure you are. You're sorry you're facing consequences. You're sorry your comfortable lives have been disrupted. You're sorry people are seeing you for who you really are rather than who you pretended to be. That's not, but are you sorry for the way you treated me, or are you just sorry you got caught? Neither of them answered. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up. You're going to learn to live in the world you created. A world where you have to earn respect rather than demand it. Where you have to prove your worth rather than assume it. Where you have to take responsibility for your own choices rather than blaming others when things go wrong. For how long? Daniel asked. For as long as it takes. As long as it takes. For what? I smiled again. And this time I didn't try to hide the coldness in it. For you to become the people you should have been all along. After they left, I stood at my window watching their little Honda disappear into the night. Tomorrow I would make more calls, plant more seeds, watch more of their carefully constructed lives crumble around them. They thought this was punishment. They had no idea that this was mercy compared to what I was truly capable of. They were about to find out. The charity gala was my masterpiece. I've been planning it for 3 weeks, ever since I realized that simply cutting off my children's financial support and damaging their reputations wasn't enough. They needed to understand not just what they had lost, but what they had never truly appreciated in the first place. The theme was strengthening family values, perfectly innocuous, socially admirable, and precisely calculated to serve my purposes. I had chosen the ballroom at the Crestmont Hotel, the same venue where Isabella's wedding reception should have been held. The irony was delicious. The guest list was a carefully curated collection of everyone who mattered in our social circle. The Hamiltons, the Weatherbys, the Chens, the entire board of the Grandwood estate, plus select members of the business community and local media. I had sent invitations to Adrian and his family, as well as several of Daniel's colleagues from the law firm. Most importantly, I had invited Isabella and Daniel. The invitation I sent to my children was a work of art in itself, elegant cream card stock with gold embossing. the kind of formal invitation that demanded attendance rather than requested it. Mrs. Eleanor Graves requests the honor of your presence at a charity benefit supporting the Strengthening Family Values Foundation. Black tie required. Please reply by return post asterisk. I knew they would come. They had to come. Refusing to attend their mother's charity gala would be social suicide in our community. The week leading up to the event was spent in careful preparation. I hired the best caterer in the Brookdale, arranged for a string quartet, and commissioned floral arrangements that would have made Isabella's cancelled wedding look modest by comparison. I also spent considerable time crafting my speech. The night of the gala, I stood in front of my full-length mirror, adjusting the diamond necklace Richard had given me for our 25th anniversary. I was wearing a midnight blue gown that had cost more than most people's monthly salary, and I looked every inch the successful, sophisticated woman I had become. My reflection smiled back at me, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. The ballroom was already half full when I arrived, fashionably late and dramatically beautiful. Conversations paused as I entered, and I graciously accepted the compliments and congratulations that followed me through the crowd. "Victoria, darling, this is absolutely magnificent," gushed Margaret Weatherby, resplendent in silver silk. "You've outdone yourself." "Thank you, Margaret. It's important to support causes that strengthen our community values, don't you think?" I moved through the room like a queen holding court, accepting praise and admiration from everyone I encountered. The charity aspect of the evening was legitimate. I was indeed raising money for family counseling services, but tonight's real purpose was something far more personal. At exactly 8:00, I spotted Isabella and Daniel entering the ballroom. They both looked uncomfortable and underdressed despite their formal attire. Isabella was wearing a black dress I recognized from her closet. Simple, elegant, but clearly not new. Daniel's tuxedo was rented and it showed. They scanned the room nervously, taking in the opulent decorations and the sea of perfectly groomed faces. This was their world, a world they had grown up in. But tonight they looked like outsiders pressing their faces against the window. Perfect. I made my way over to them, my smile radiant with maternal warmth. "Darlings, you came. I'm so pleased." Isabella looked like she wanted to run. "Mom, we need to talk." "Of course, dear. But not now. This is a celebration. Come, let me introduce you to some people." Before they could protest, I guided them through the crowd, making strategic introductions that placed them firmly in the position of my wee-ward children who were finding their way back to family values. "Patricia, you remember my daughter Isabella and my son Daniel? They're both going through such interesting periods of growth and self-discovery." "Adrian," I called out as we approached the bar, "how lovely that you could make it. Isabella, dear, why don't you go say hello to your fiancé?" But Adrian's greeting was notably cool, and I could see Isabella's face crumple slightly as he turned away after only a few polite words. The evening progressed exactly as I had planned. I watched my children navigate the social minefield I had created for them, seeing how our friends and acquaintances treated them with polite distance rather than the warm familiarity they had once enjoyed. Every conversation was an exercise in subtle humiliation. People who had known them their entire lives now spoke to them with the careful politeness reserved for unstable family members at formal events. At 9:30, I took the stage for my speech. "Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me tonight in support of such an important cause." The room fell silent. All attention focused on me. I could see Isabella and Daniel standing near the back, their faces tense with apprehension. Family values are the foundation of our society. I began my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, but sometimes those values become corrupted by entitlement, by taking our loved ones for granted, by forgetting that love is something that must be earned and maintained through respect and gratitude. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I've learned recently that even the strongest family bonds can be tested when children grow up believing that their parents' love and support are obligations rather than gifts. I could see people beginning to understand that this speech was more personal than they had initially realized. Tonight, we're raising money to help families learn to communicate better, to appreciate each other more fully, and to understand that healthy relationships require mutual respect and genuine gratitude. My eyes found Isabella and Daniel in the crowd. They both looked stricken. I want to especially thank my own children for teaching me these valuable lessons. Through their recent journey toward independence, they've shown me the importance of allowing young adults to discover their own capabilities, rather than enabling their dependence. The room was completely silent now. Everyone acutely aware that they were witnessing a very public family drama. Isabella and Daniel have been so brave in choosing to build their own lives without relying on family support. I'm so proud of their courage and facing the real world on their own terms. I could see Adrian's parents exchanging concerned glances. Several people were looking directly at my children whose faces had gone pale. They've taught me that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is step back and allow their children to experience the consequences of their choices. It's not easy to watch your children struggle, but it's necessary for their growth. Someone in the crowd actually winced. So tonight, as we celebrate family values, let's remember that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's enablement. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the opportunity to discover who they really are when they can't rely on anyone but themselves. The applause that followed was polite but uncomfortable. People weren't sure whether they were clapping for charity or witnessing a very public downing. I raised my champagne glass to family values, and to the courage to live by them even when it's difficult. As I left the stage, I could see Isabella pushing through the crowd toward the exit, her face streaming with tears. Daniel followed close behind, his expression murderous, but it was too late. The damage was done. By the time they reached the lobby, someone had already captured Isabella's dramatic exit on their phone. By the time they made it to the parking lot, the video was being uploaded to social media. I spent the rest of the evening graciously accepting condolences from people who assumed I was a grieving mother dealing with ungrateful children. Every conversation reinforced the narrative I had so carefully constructed. Eleanor Graves was a saint trying to help her troubled children learn responsibility. You're handling this with such grace, Patricia Hamilton murmured, squeezing my hand. Not every mother would have the strength to do what's best for her children. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, I replied, managing to inject just the right note of brave suffering into my voice. But sometimes love means saying no. The next morning, the local society page ran a full spread about the gala, complete with a photo of me giving my speech and several quotes about the importance of family accountability. There was also a small sidebar about the dramatic family moment that had unfolded during the evening. By noon, the story had made it to social media, where it was being shared with comments like, "Tough love," and finally, "A parent who isn't afraid to let her kids grow up." My phone rang constantly throughout the day, friends calling to offer support, acquaintances wanting to gossip about what they had witnessed, and reporters asking if I would comment on my brave parenting stance. I declined all interviews but accepted all expressions of sympathy. By evening, Isabella's breakdown at the gala had become a minor internet sensation. The video of her tearful exit was being shared with commentary about entitled millennials and helicopter parenting. She had become a cautionary tale, and I had become a hero. My children, on the other hand, had become social Paris. That night, I sat in my garden with a glass of champagne, reading the comments on various social media posts about the evening. The overwhelming consensus was that I was a courageous mother who had finally taken a stand against entitled children. One comment in particular made me smile. Every parent should have the guts to do what Eleanor Graves did. Maybe if more kids faced real consequences, they'd learn some respect. I raised my glass to the stars and whispered to consequences. Tomorrow, Phase 4 would begin. The aftermath of the charity gala exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. Within 48 hours, my children had become local celebrities for all the wrong reasons. While I basked in the glow of public sympathy and admiration, the society columns were particularly satisfying. "Local mother takes brave stand against entitled children," read one headline. Another proclaimed, "Eleanor Graves shows true family values in action." My favorite was from the weekend lifestyle section, "When love means letting go, a mother's difficult choice." Each article painted me as a devoted mother forced to take drastic action to help her adult children learn responsibility. The narrative was so perfectly crafted that even I was almost convinced of my own nobility. Monday morning brought the first major casualty. Adrian called off the engagement. I learned about it through Margaret Weatherby, who called me at precisely 9:00 a.m. with barely concealed excitement. "Victoria, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling so early, but I thought you should. No, Patricia Hamilton just called to tell me that Adrian has broken up with Isabella." I made an appropriately shocked sound. "Oh my goodness, when did this happen?" "Apparently late last night." Patricia said he couldn't handle the public humiliation, especially after his colleagues started asking if he was really ready to marry someone so emotionally unstable. How terrible for both of them. Patricia also mentioned that Adrian's father was concerned about potential career implications if his son married into a family with such public difficulties. The irony was exquisite. Devon's family, who had been perfectly happy to align themselves with my wealth and social position when it benefited them, had now decided that association with the Hale family was too risky for their precious son's reputation. I suppose young people today don't understand that marriage means standing by each other through difficult times. I said carefully, exactly, though I must say Patricia seemed rather relieved. She never thought Isabella was quite stable enough for her son. After Margaret hung up, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. Isabella's engagement had been the last vestige of her old life, the final symbol of the privileged future she had taken for granted. Now even that was gone. The phone rang again. This time it was Monica Chun from the boutique. Victoria, I wanted to let you know that I had to let Isabella go permanently. After the incident at your charity gala, several customers have asked specifically not to be helped by her. I can't afford to have someone working here who makes customers uncomfortable. I understand completely, Monica. Business must come first. I feel terrible about it, but with the video circulating on social media, people are talking about her breakdown and it's affecting the shop's reputation. You're absolutely right to protect your business. I'm sure Isabella will understand, but if you enjoyed this story, please support me by liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much. Isabella didn't understand. She showed up at my door at 2:00 that afternoon, her face swollen from crying and her hair unwashed. He left me, she said without preamble when I opened the door. Adrian, yes, I heard. I'm so sorry, darling. Are you? Her voice was bitter, older somehow. Are you really sorry, or is this exactly what you wanted? I stepped aside to let her in, though she looked like she might collapse on my doorstep otherwise. I never wanted you to be hurt, Isabella. I wanted you to grow up. Well, congratulations. I'm all grown up now. I lost my job, my fiancé, my friends, my entire life, all in one weekend. These are consequences, not punishments. What's the difference? I guided her into the living room, noting how she seemed to shrink into the expensive furniture that had once been part of her everyday environment. Consequences are what happen when our choices catch up with us. Punishments are arbitrary penalties imposed by others. This feels pretty arbitrary to me, does it? Let's review what's actually happened, shall we? You lost your job because you were unreliable and unprofessional. You lost your fiancé because he realized you weren't mature enough for marriage. You lost your social standing because people saw how you really behave when you don't get your way. I wasn't unreliable. You were over an hour late to work because you couldn't find your car keys. You had an emotional outburst with a customer. You've been increasingly unstable and dramatic since your wedding was canceled. My wedding was canceled because you destroyed it. Your wedding was canceled because you called me a pest for trying to include people who love you. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to process the logic of what I was saying. So what happens now? She asked finally. Do I just disappear, become a cautionary tale for other ungrateful daughters? You figure out how to build a life based on your own efforts rather than my support. I don't know how to do that. Then you learn from who? Everyone in town thinks I'm a spoiled brat who had a public breakdown. Who's going to hire me? Who's going to date me? Who's going to be my friend? I studied her face, seeing genuine desperation there for the first time. This was what I had been waiting for. The moment when she finally understood the full scope of what she had lost. Perhaps I said carefully, you should have thought about that before. You decided you'd rather lose your mother than show her basic respect. I never said that. Daniel said that and you agreed with him. I was upset. You were honest. Sometimes crisis reveals who we really are. She began crying again. The hopeless tears of someone who had finally realized the depth of their situation. What do you want me to do? Begged Gravel. Tell me what you want and I'll do it. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to learn that love and respect are earned, not demanded. I want you to become someone worthy of the advantages you've been given. And if I learn all those lessons, will you fix this? I smiled sadly. Oh, sweetheart, I'm not the one who broke this. I can't be the one to fix it, but you could. You could call people, explain that it was all a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This is exactly who you are when you can't rely on my money and protection. That's not fair. Fair? You think it's fair that I spent 30 years sacrificing my own dreams to give you everything you wanted only to be called a pest when I try to share in your happiness? I apologize for that. You apologize for getting caught. There's a difference. She left an hour later, looking even more defeated than when she had arrived. Through my window I watched her drive away in her little Honda, and I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and something that might have been sadness, but the sadness was brief. That evening I received another call that reminded me exactly why I was doing this. Mrs. Hale, this is Detective Martinez with the police department. I'm calling about your son Daniel. My heart skipped a beat. Is he all right? He's fine physically, but he's been arrested for credit card fraud. I'm sorry. What? Apparently, he's been using stolen credit card information to make online purchases. We've traced several fraudulent transactions back to his computer. I sat down heavily, genuinely shocked. Are you certain? Yes, ma'am. He's admitted to the charges. It appears he's been involved in this for several weeks, trying to maintain his lifestyle after his financial support was cut off. I see. He's asked me to call you about bail. It's set at $50,000. $50,000. The irony was staggering. Daniel had turned to crime rather than swallow his pride and find legitimate work. Mrs. Hale, are you there? Yes, detective. I'm here. I'll be down to post bail shortly. Thank you, ma'am. He'll be processed out within a few hours of payment. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. Daniel had committed actual crimes rather than adapt to his new financial reality. The boy who had once been destined for partnership at a prestigious law firm had chosen fraud over finding a job that matched his reduced circumstances. It was worse than I had imagined and better than I had hoped. I drove to the police station and posted Daniel's bail, maintaining the perfect facade of a concerned mother throughout the process. The desk sergeant was sympathetic the way people always were when dealing with worried parents. It happens more than you'd think, ma'am, he said as I signed the paperwork. Young people who've never faced real financial pressure sometimes make poor choices when their circumstances change. I'm sure he'll learn from this experience. I replied. Daniel emerged from the holding area, looking haggarded and humiliated. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained, his hair disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well even before his arrest. We drove home in silence. When we reached my driveway, he finally spoke. Thank you for posting bail. You're welcome. I suppose you're going to lecture me about poor choices and consequences. Actually, I think the criminal justice system will handle that quite effectively. He turned to look at me, surprise flickering across his face. You're not going to gloat about my son becoming a criminal? No, Daniel. Even I'm not that vindictive. Then why did you bail me out? I studied his face in the dim light from my porch. He looked young and scared, more like the boy he had once been, the entitled man he had become. Because despite everything, you're still my son. And because I wanted you to understand something. What? This is what happens when privileged people refuse to adjust their expectations to match their reality. You chose crime over humility. I didn't choose crime. I was desperate. You chose crime over getting a job that paid less than you thought you deserved. You chose crime over moving to a smaller apartment. You chose crime over admitting that you needed help. I couldn't ask for help. Everyone in this town thinks I'm a failure already. And whose fault is that? He was quiet for a long moment. Are you going to pay for a lawyer? No, Mom. You're 30 years old, Daniel. You have a law degree from Harvard. If anyone should understand the importance of legal representation, it's you. Figure it out. With what money? You froze my trust fund, remember? Then I suppose you'll need to convince a public defender to take your case seriously, won't you? I got out of the car and walked toward my front door, leaving him sitting in the passenger seat. Mom, wait. I turned back. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices just like Isabella is doing. And if I learn whatever lesson you're trying to teach me, then you'll be a better person than you were before. But will you forgive me? I looked at my son, really looked at him, seeing past the expensive clothes and privileged education to the scared young man underneath. I already have forgiven you, Daniel. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. So this is it. This is just my life now. This is your life until you decide to change it. How am I supposed to change it when everyone in town thinks I'm a criminal and a failure? The same way millions of other people rebuild their lives after making mistakes. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one small step at a time. That's not how our world works. In our social circle, reputation is everything. Then maybe you need to find a new social circle. I went inside and locked the door behind me, leaving Daniel sitting in my driveway. Through the window, I watched him eventually call a cab and disappear into the night. The next morning, news of Daniel's arrest made it into the local paper. Local attorney arrested for credit card fraud, read the headline, accompanied by a photo from his law firm's website. By afternoon, Jonathan Wells had called to inform me that Daniel's employment had been terminated immediately. I'm sorry, Victoria, he said, but we can't have someone facing criminal charges representing our clients. I understand completely, Harrison. You have to protect your firm's reputation. Is there anything we can do to help? Any way we can support the family during this difficult time? You're very kind, but I think Daniel needs to handle this on his own. Sometimes the best way to help someone is to let them face their challenges independently. That evening, both of my children showed up at my door together. They looked like refugees from their own lives, dirty, tired, and completely defeated. We need to talk, Isabella said when I opened the door. Both of us, Daniel added, together. I let them in and offered them tea, which they both declined. They sat on my sofa like supplicants in a throne room, their faces pale and desperate. "We get it now," Isabella said. "We understand what you've been trying to teach us. Do you? We were spoiled and entitled and disrespectful." Daniel continued. "We took you for granted and treated your love like an obligation. And we're sorry," Isabella added. "Really, truly sorry." "Well, do anything to make this right," Daniel said. "Anything you want?" I looked at both of them, my children who had once been the center of my universe, and felt a complex mixture of triumph and melancholy. "What do you think I want? For us to grovel," Isabella said quietly. "For us to beg for forgiveness. For us to prove that we've learned our lesson," Daniel added. "And what lesson do you think you've learned? That we can't survive without you," Isabella whispered. "That we need your money and protection and connections," Daniel said. I shook my head sadly. "Oh, my dears, you still don't understand at all." "Then tell us," Isabella cried. "Tell us what you want us to understand." "I don't want you to need me. I want you to value me." They stared at me in confusion. "The lesson isn't that you can't survive without my money. The lesson is that you never appreciated what my love was worth until it was gone." "We appreciate it now," Daniel said desperately. "Because you lost it. Because you're facing consequences. But would you appreciate it if I gave it back to you tomorrow?" Neither of them answered. "Would you call me a pest if I tried to help with your wedding planning? Would you tell me you'd rather lose your mother than admit you were wrong?" "No," Isabella said. But her voice lacked conviction. "No, you wouldn't say it, but would you feel it?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "You see," I said gently, "this isn't about punishment. This is about becoming the kind of people who deserve to be loved unconditionally." "And if we become those people," Daniel asked, "then you'll understand that love isn't something you demand or take for granted. It's something you cherish and protect and earn every single day." "So what happens now?" Isabella asked. I smiled, and for the first time in weeks there was genuine warmth in it. "Now you learn to build lives worth living whether I'm part of them or not." After they left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my garden watching the sun set behind the oak trees. Tomorrow would bring new challenges for my children, new opportunities for growth or failure. But tonight, for the first time since this all began, I felt something approaching peace. The worst was yet to come for them, but perhaps the worst was finally over for me. 2 months after Daniel's arrest, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hay, this is Linda Morrison from Second Chances Employment Services. Your daughter Isabella has applied for a position with one of our client companies, and we're conducting reference checks." I sat down my morning coffee and smiled. "Of course, how can I help you?" "Well, I have to admit this is unusual. Most of our clients are people transitioning back into the workforce after difficulties. But Isabella has given you as a character reference, and frankly her employment history has some gaps that concern our client." "What kind of position is she applying for?" "It's a part-time retail position at a discount clothing store. The pay is minimum wage, but they're willing to work with people who are rebuilding their lives, minimum wage retail work." The daughter, who had once managed a high-end boutique, was now applying to fold clothes at a store that sold $15 dresses. "I see. And what would you like to know about Isabella?" "Well, according to her application, she's been unemployed for 2 months after leaving her previous position due to restructuring. But our background check shows that she was actually terminated from several positions during that time. That's unfortunate, but not uncommon for young people who are learning to navigate workplace expectations. She also listed you as a reference for character, but given that you're her mother, you're wondering if I can be objective about her qualifications." "Exactly." I considered my response carefully. This was an opportunity to either help Isabella or ensure her continued descent into desperation. "Linda, I want to be completely honest with you. Isabella has been going through a very difficult period of personal growth. She's had to confront some hard truths about her work ethic and her sense of entitlement. I see. However, I believe that sometimes the most valuable employees are those who have learned from their mistakes. Isabella is discovering what it means to truly need a job rather than simply wanting one. And you think she's ready for that kind of responsibility? I think she's more motivated now than she's ever been in her life." After I hung up, I realized I had just given Isabella a genuinely positive reference. Not because I was softening, but because her desperation would make her a better employee than she had ever been before. 3 hours later, Isabella called me. "Mom, I got the job. Congratulations, dear. I'm proud of you. Are you? Because Linda Morrison said you gave me a really good reference and I wasn't sure. I told her the truth that you're learning valuable lessons about the dignity of work. It's minimum wage. Mom, 8 hours a day folding clothes and dealing with customers who treat me like I'm invisible. And how does that feel? terrible, humiliating, like my life has become some kind of punishment, or like your life has become real for the first time." There was a long pause. "I move into my new apartment tomorrow," she said finally. "How is it? Small, cheap, in a neighborhood where I have to lock my car and watch over my shoulder walking to the front door. It sounds like you're learning to live within your means." "I hate it." "I'm sure you do. The neighbors play loud music until 3:00 a.m. The heat doesn't work properly. There's mold in the bathroom. Then I suppose you have some motivation to work hard and earn something better. This isn't living, Mom. This is surviving." "Yes, it is. And millions of people do it every day without complaining to their mothers about how difficult it is." Another pause. "Adrian's mother saw me at the grocery store yesterday. She looked right through me like I didn't exist. That must have been uncomfortable. She used to invite me to her garden parties. Now she pretends she doesn't know me. Social position is fragile, isn't it? I never realized how much of my life was built on your reputation instead of my own." I felt a small spark of hope. "And how does that make you feel? Ashamed, angry, scared?" "Good, good. Those are appropriate emotions for someone who's been living a lie, so what do I do with them?" "You use them as motivation to build something real." That afternoon, I received another call, this time from Jonathan Wells at the law firm. "Victoria, I wanted to give you an update on Daniel's situation. Of course, his case goes to trial next month. The prosecutor is offering a plea deal. 6 months in county jail and 2 years probation in exchange for a guilty plea. And what does Daniel think about that? He's struggling with the decision. His public defender is advising him to take the deal, but Daniel seems to think he might be able to fight the charges." "Fight them? How?" "He's claiming financial duress. Apparently he wants to argue that his sudden change in circumstances drove him to make desperate choices." I laughed, and the sound surprised even me with its bitterness. "So his defense is that being cut off from his trust fund justifies committing crimes. I'm afraid that seems to be a strategy. And what do you think of that approach?" "Honestly, I think he's deluding himself. He used stolen credit card information to purchase luxury items he couldn't afford." "That's not duress. That's entitlement. Will you testify on his behalf if asked?" I'm not sure what I could say that would help his case. His work performance had been deteriorating for weeks before his arrest. Then I suppose he'll have to face the consequences of his choices without character witnesses. "Victoria, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is there any chance you might reconsider helping him financially? A good lawyer could probably get him a better deal." Harrison, Daniel chose crime over accepting help from family members. He chose fraud over admitting he needed to change his lifestyle. Why would I reward those choices by funding his defense? Because he's your son. Yes, he is. And sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is allow their child to experience the full weight of their mistakes. That evening, Daniel showed up at my door. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, the first time I had seen him in casual clothes since high school. He looked older somehow and smaller. "I need to ask you something," he said without preamble. "Quayne." He followed me into the living room but remained standing pacing nervously near the window. "The trial is next month. So I heard I could go to jail, Mom." "Yes, you could. Doesn't that bother you?" I studied his face, seeing the genuine fear there. "Of course it bothers me, but not as much as watching you become someone who thinks crime is preferable to humility." I wasn't thinking clearly. I was desperate. You were prideful. There is a difference, Finey. I was prideful. I made terrible choices because I couldn't accept that my circumstances had changed. Are you happy now? I'm not happy that you're facing jail time, Daniel. But I am relieved that you're finally being honest about your motivations. So, will you help me? How? Hire me a real lawyer. Someone who can get me a better deal than 6 months in county jail. Why would I do that? Because I'm your son and I'm asking for help. You're asking for money. I'm asking for help. No, you're asking me to shield you from the consequences of your choices. That's not help. That's enablement. What's the difference? Help would be visiting you in jail and supporting you through the process of rebuilding your life afterward. Help would be encouraging you to take responsibility for your actions and learn from them. Help would be believing in your ability to survive this and become a better person. And money. Money would be teaching you that there's always a way to avoid facing the truth about yourself. He sank into my armchair looking defeated. I'm scared, Mom. I know, I've never been in jail before. I don't know how to survive in that kind of environment. Then you'll learn. People adapt to difficult circumstances all the time. What if I can't? Then you'll discover strengths you didn't know you had. And if I don't, then you'll discover the full cost of your choices. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of a situation settling between us like a heavy blanket. Do you hate me? He asked finally. No, Daniel, I don't hate you. But you're not going to help me. I'm helping you in the only way that matters. I'm refusing to enable your continued irresponsibility. That doesn't feel like help. I'm sure it doesn't. He left without saying goodbye. and I watched him walk down my driveway with the heavy steps of someone carrying an enormous burden. Later that evening, I received a text message from Isabella, working double shift tomorrow. Feet already hurt and I haven't even started. Is this what real life feels like? I texted back. Yes, but it gets easier when you stop expecting it to be different. Her response came an hour later. I don't think I'm strong enough for this. You're stronger than you think, you just don't know it yet. How can you be sure? Because you're my daughter, and despite everything, I raised you to survive. That night I sat in my garden with a glass of wine, thinking about strength and survival and the strange ways that love manifests itself. My children thought I was punishing them, but I was actually preparing them for a world that would be far less forgiving than I had ever been. Tomorrow would bring new challenges for both of them. Another day of minimum wage labor for Isabella. Another step closer to potential incarceration for Daniel. But for the first time since this all began, I felt genuinely hopeful about their futures. They were finally learning what it meant to be human. 8 months into their new reality, my children had developed a fascinating routine. Every 2 weeks, one or both of them would appear at my door, looking progressively more worn down by the relentless demands of actual adult responsibility. They never came with demands anymore. They had learned that lesson. Instead, they came with updates as if reporting on their progress to a teacher who might or might not grant them passing grades. This particular Tuesday evening, Isabella arrived just as I was finishing dinner. Through the window, I could see her sitting in her car for several minutes before, getting out as if gathering courage for whatever conversation she had planned. She looked different again, thinner, with calluses on her hands from her retail job and something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a weariness that suggested she had learned to expect disappointment. "Hello, darling," I said as I opened the door. "How are you?" "Tired," she said simply. "Can I come in?" "Of course." She followed me into the kitchen, accepting the cup of tea I offered and wrapping her hands around it as if she were cold. "I got promoted," she said without preamble. "Congratulations. What's your new position?" "Assistant shift supervisor at the discount store. It means I get to train new employees and handle customer complaints that are too complicated for regular sales associates." "That sounds like more responsibility." "It is, and it comes with a raise, $2 whole an hour more." I waited for her to continue, sensing there was more to this story. "The thing is," she said slowly, "I'm actually good at it. The training part, I'm patient with people who don't understand things right away, and I can explain procedures in ways that make sense." "That's wonderful, Isabella." "Is it though? Because part of me wonders if this is just it. If this is my life now, training minimum wage workers to fold clothes and handle returns. What would you like your life to be?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her tea. "I don't know anymore. 8 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. The big wedding, the perfect house, the social life, all of it. But now, I can't imagine wanting any of those things again. Not the way I used to want them. Why not? Because I know how much they actually cost. Not just in money, but in dependence, in giving up pieces of yourself to maintain an image that isn't even real." I felt a flutter of something that might have been pride. "So what do you want now?" "I want to be able to pay my own rent without counting every dollar. I want to not be afraid of my car breaking down because I can't afford to fix it. I want to feel like I earned whatever good things happened to me. Those are reasonable goals. Are they enough though? Is it enough to just survive and pay your bills and be responsible? What else do you think life should include? I don't know. Purpose, maybe. The feeling that you're building something that matters." I sat down my own tea and looked at her directly. "Isabella, 8 months ago, you couldn't imagine a life that wasn't funded by someone else's money. Now you're talking about purpose and building something meaningful. Do you understand how significant that change is? It doesn't feel significant. It feels like I've lost everything and I'm trying to convince myself that's okay. Or it feels like you're discovering who you actually are when you're not performing a role that someone else defined for you." She considered this and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you miss me, the person I used to be?" The question caught me off guard with its insight and vulnerability. "I miss the little girl you were before you learned to take things for granted," I said carefully. "I miss the teenager who used to tell me about her dreams and ask for my advice. But the woman you were 8 months ago, no, I don't miss her because she was horrible, because she wasn't real. She was a character you were playing. The perfect daughter with a perfect life who deserved everything handed to her. And now you're becoming someone real. Someone who understands that respect is earned and that love isn't something you can demand." She was crying but quietly, without the dramatic sobs that had once been her standard response to emotional stress. "I'm so tired, Mom, of working and worrying and having to think about every small expense of living in that awful apartment and dealing with customers who treat me like I'm beneath them. But you're doing it barely, but you're doing it. 8 months ago you would have collapsed completely if faced with these challenges. Now you're handling them, even if it's difficult. Is that enough? It's everything. The next evening Daniel appeared at my door with a manila envelope in his hands and an expression I couldn't read. I took the plea deal, he said without greeting. I see. When do you report? Next Monday. 6 months in county, 2 years probation. I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. He moved into my living room and sat heavily on the sofa, still clutching the envelope. I brought you something, he said, extending the envelope toward me. What is it? A letter. I wrote it for the judge, but I thought you should read it too. I accepted the envelope but didn't open it immediately. What does it say? The truth about what I did and why I did it, about the choices I made and the person I became. And what person was that? Someone who thought the rules didn't apply to him, someone who believed he deserved things he hadn't earned, someone who would rather become a criminal than admit he needed to change his expectations. I opened the envelope and began reading. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Daniel's careful handwriting, and it was perhaps the most honest thing he had ever shared with me. The letter detailed his understanding of his actions, his acknowledgement of the harm he had caused, and his commitment to making amends. It was clear, thoughtful, and completely without excuses. This is very well written, I said when I finished reading. I've had a lot of time to think about what I actually did and why. And what conclusion did you reach? That I was a coward? That I chose the hardest possible path because I was too proud to choose the easy one? The easy one. Getting a job that paid less than I wanted, moving to a smaller apartment, asking for help when I needed it, admitting that I had been living beyond my means, and now I'm going to jail. I have no career prospects, no money, and no idea how to rebuild any of it. But at least I know who I actually am now, and maybe that's worth something. I folded the letter fully and placed it back in the envelope. Daniel, this letter suggests that you've learned something very important about accountability and personal responsibility. I hope so. Are you afraid? Terrified but also relieved. I think I'm tired of lying to myself about what kind of person I was. And what kind of person do you want to be when you get out? Someone who earns what he has. Someone who doesn't expect the world to accommodate his weaknesses. Those are worthy goals. Will you? He paused, looking uncertain. Will you visit me? Do you want me to? I think so. Not to bring money or try to fix anything, just to visit. Then yes, I'll visit you. He left an hour later and I watched him drive away for what would be the last time for 6 months. Despite everything, I felt proud of the man he was becoming. Not the man he had been, but the one who was emerging from the wreckage of his old life. That weekend I did something I hadn't done in months. I called both of my children. Isabella, dear, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner next Sunday. Nothing fancy. I'll cook something simple. You want to have dinner, just the 2 of us? I thought it might be nice to spend some time together. Is this are you? I'm not offering to fix your problems or give you money if that's what you're asking. I'm offering to share a meal with my daughter. I'd like that. Good. 7:00 I'll be there. Then I called the county jail and arranged to visit Daniel the following week. For the first time in 10 months, I was looking forward to spending time with my children. Not because I felt obligated to, but because I genuinely wanted to see who they were becoming. They were no longer the people I had raised to be entitled and dependent. They were becoming the people I should have raised them to be all along, strong, self-reliant, and grateful for what they had instead of resentful about what they lacked. It had taken destroying their old lives to give them the chance to build better ones. But perhaps destruction was sometimes the most loving gift a parent could give. The dinner with Isabella was unlike any conversation we had shared in years, perhaps ever. She arrived precisely at 7, carrying a small bouquet of grocery store flowers and wearing a dress I had never seen before. I bought these for you, she said, offering tea. If you enjoyed this story, please support me by liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much. Flowers with an uncertainty that suggested she wasn't sure if gifts were appropriate in our current relationship. They're lovely, darling. Thank you. As I arranged the flowers in a vase, I studied her reflection in the kitchen window. The woman standing in my kitchen was recognizably my daughter, but transformed in ways that went far beyond her physical appearance. There was a stillness about her that replaced the restless energy she had always carried, and when she spoke, she seemed to choose her words more carefully. I don't think I've ever bought you flowers before, she said. No, you haven't. That's terrible, isn't it? 28 years old and I've never thought to bring my mother flowers. You're thinking of it now. Over dinner, a simple roasted chicken with vegetables. We talked about her job, her apartment, the small details of her daily life. But underneath the surface conversation, there was something else happening. We were learning to relate to each other as adults rather than as mother and dependent child. "Can I tell you something?" she asked as I served dessert. "Of course, last week one of my coworkers asked me for money. Her daughter needed school supplies and she was short on rent. It was only $40, but I realized I didn't have $40 to spare. And for the first time in my life I understood what that actually means. Not I don't want to spend $40, but I literally cannot afford to help someone else because I need every dollar I have." How did that feel? Awful and humbling and somehow important. Important how? Because I finally understand why people get upset when money is wasted or when someone takes financial help for granted. When every dollar matters, you see money differently. And how do you see it now? As something you earn rather than something you deserve. As security rather than just a way to buy things you want. After dinner, we sat in the garden with tea and Isabella asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. "Mom, are you happy?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, with your life, with what you've done to us, with how things turned out." I considered the question carefully, watching the last light fade from the sky. "I'm satisfied," I said finally. "I'm satisfied that I finally stopped enabling behavior that was hurting all of us. But are you happy?" "I'm happy when I see who you're becoming. I'm happy when I read letters like the one Daniel wrote. I'm happy when I realize that my children are finally growing into people I genuinely like spending time with. And before, when we were the way we were before, I was proud of your accomplishments but not proud of your character. I loved you desperately, but didn't particularly enjoy your company." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't think I enjoyed my own company either," she said finally. "I was so busy maintaining an image and getting what I thought I wanted that I never stopped to think about who I actually was and who are you now. I'm still figuring that out. But whoever she is, she's someone who buys her mother flowers and means it when she says thank you." The following week, I visited Daniel in jail for the first time. The visiting room was exactly what I had expected. Institutional fluorescent lighting, plastic chairs, and the peculiar combination of boredom and tension that seems to permeate correctional facilities. Daniel appeared in orange scrubs that made him look younger and more vulnerable than I had seen him since childhood. He had lost weight and there were shadows under his eyes. But there was also something in his posture that seemed more solid somehow. "Thank you for coming," he said as he sat down across from me. "How are you adjusting?" "Better than I expected, worse than I hoped." He managed a small smile. "Turns out privilege doesn't prepare you for institutional living. What's the hardest part?" "The boredom mostly and the constant noise and having to follow rules that don't make sense just because someone with authority made them." "Sounds like excellent preparation for most jobs." He laughed, and for a moment he sounded like the boy he used to be. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about consequences and character, and who I want to be when I get out of here." "And what have you decided?" "I want to be someone who doesn't need to lie about his past. Someone who can look people in the eye and tell them exactly what mistakes he's made and what he learned from them. That's a worthy goal. The other inmates here, some of them have been in and out of the system their whole lives. But there are others like me. People who made terrible choices because they couldn't handle their circumstances changing." "What do you talk about with them?" "Mostly about how we got here and how we're going to make sure we don't come back." "Have you figured out the answer to that second question?" "Start small. Be honest. Work hard at whatever job will hire someone with a criminal record. Stop expecting life to be fair or easy. Those sound like lessons that should have been learned much earlier. They should have, but I guess some people need to lose everything before they can appreciate anything." We talked for another hour about his plans for after his release, about the job training programs available in the jail, about the reality of rebuilding a life with a criminal record. When visiting time ended, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine respect for my son. That evening I received an unexpected phone call from Cecilia Grant. "Victoria, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to ask you about something." "Of course, Patricia, what can I do for you?" "Well, it's about Adrian. He's been quite upset lately, and when I asked him about it, he mentioned your family situation." "Oh, apparently he's been having second thoughts about breaking up with Isabella. He says he realized that he ended the engagement for all the wrong reasons." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "How interesting. He's been asking about her, whether she's seeing anyone, how she's doing, that sort of thing. I think he's considering reaching out to her." "And what did you tell him?" "Well, that's why I'm calling." I wasn't sure what to say. Is she in a better place now? Has she worked through whatever difficulty she was having? The question was loaded with implications. Patricia was essentially asking if it was safe for her precious son to re-engage with my daughter now that the drama had died down. Patricia, I think that's a question Adrian should ask Isabella directly, don't you? Of course, but as his mother, I want to make sure he's not setting himself up for more heartbreak. I understand your concern, but I think you'll find that Isabella is quite different now than she was 10 months ago. Different how? She's learned the value of things she used to take for granted. She's developed a work ethic. She's discovered that she's stronger than she thought. So, you think she would be suitable for Adrian again? The word suitable hung in the air like a poorly concealed insult. Patricia, I think the real question is whether Adrian would be suitable for the woman Isabella has become. There was a pause. I'm not sure I understand. Isabella has learned to value people who see her worth rather than her utility. She's developed relationships based on respect rather than convenience. I'm not sure Adrian has learned those same lessons. Adrian is a successful young man with excellent prospects. Adrian is a young man who abandoned his fiancée the moment she became socially inconvenient. Whether that makes him suitable for anyone is debatable. After I hung up, I immediately called Isabella. Darling, I thought you should know that you might be hearing from Adrian soon. Adrian, why would Adrian call me? Apparently he's having second thoughts about ending your engagement. There was a long silence. What kind of second thoughts? The kind that happen when people realize the drama has passed and it might be safe to re-engage. Oh, another pause. What do you think I should do if he calls? What do you think you should do? 8 months ago I would have been desperate to get him back. I would have done anything to convince him that I'd changed and that we could make it work. And now I'm trying to figure out why I ever wanted to marry someone who had dropped me the moment things got difficult. That's a very mature perspective. Is it though, or am I just protecting myself because I'm afraid of being hurt again? Does it matter? Either way, you're making decisions based on your own judgment rather than desperation. Mom, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think I'm strong enough to be on my own, not just surviving but actually building a life I want? Isabella, 8 months ago, you couldn't imagine paying your own rent. Now you're training new employees and earning promotions. What do you think? I think I'm stronger than I knew, but I also think I'm lonelier than I expected. Loneliness is different from being alone. Being alone is a circumstance. Loneliness is a feeling that comes from not knowing yourself well enough to enjoy your own company. And which one am I, you tell me? She was quiet for several minutes. I think I'm learning to like the person I am when no one else is around, she said finally. And that's something I never experienced before. Why not? Because I was always performing for someone. You, Adrian, my friends, my coworkers. I never just existed as myself. And how does it feel to exist as yourself? Scary, but also kind of wonderful. The next morning I received a call from Monica Chun at the boutique. Victoria, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to ask you about Isabella. What about her? Well, she applied for a management position at our main store downtown. It's a significant step up. Salary instead of hourly wages, benefits, real responsibility. That sounds wonderful for her. The thing is, during her interview she was completely honest about why she left her previous position here. She told them about the customer incident, about her unreliability, about the personal problem she was having, and they were impressed by her honesty. But they wanted to check with me about her recent work history at the discount store where she's been working. I see. Victoria, I have to tell you, the reports I'm getting about Isabella are remarkable. Her supervisor says she's the most reliable employee they've ever had. She's never late, never calls in sick, and she's trained more new hires successfully than anyone else in the company. That does sound impressive. More than that, she's apparently well liked by customers and coworkers. People describe her as patient, helpful, and genuinely kind. And how does that compare to the Isabella who worked for you before? There's no comparison. The person I'm hearing about sounds like a completely different individual. People can change, Monica. Sometimes circumstances force growth that wouldn't happen otherwise. I suppose what I'm really asking is whether you think this change is permanent, whether she's truly learned from her experiences, or if she's just temporarily motivated by necessity. I considered the question carefully. This was another moment where I could either support Isabella's progress or sabotage it. Monica, I think Isabella has learned what it feels like to earn respect rather than demand it. I think she's discovered that work can be meaningful rather than just necessary. And I think she's found out that she's capable of much more than anyone, including herself, ever believed. So, you'd recommend her for the position? I'd recommend that you give her the opportunity to prove herself. But I'd also suggest that you judge her on her current performance rather than her past mistakes. That afternoon, Isabella called me in tears. But these were tears of joy rather than despair. Mom, I got the job, the management position at Monica's downtown store. Congratulations, darling. I'm so proud of you. They're offering me a salary that's almost double what I'm making now. Plus health insurance and vacation time. I'll be able to move to a better apartment, maybe even start saving money. How does that feel? Incredible, terrifying, like I'm finally becoming the person I was supposed to be all along. And you earned every bit of it. I know, that's the best part. I actually know I earned it. That evening, Adrian called her. She told me about the conversation the next day. He wanted to have coffee. She said to talk about where we stand and whether we might be able to work things out. And what did you tell him? I told him I'd think about it. But honestly, Mom, the whole conversation felt strange. Strange how? He kept talking about how he'd made a mistake and how he should have been more supportive. But he never once asked about who I am now or what I've learned or whether I'm happy. What did he ask about? Whether I was back to normal, whether the family situation had been resolved, whether I thought we could pick up where we left off. And what did you realize? That he doesn't want to get back together with me. He wants to get back together with the person I used to be, and that person doesn't exist anymore. How do you feel about that? Relieved, I think, because the person I used to be wasn't strong enough to build the kind of life I want now. And what kind of life do you want now? One where I'm valued for who I am, not what I can provide or what image I project. One where I'm with someone who sees my struggles as growth rather than inconvenience. Those sound like the desires of a woman who knows her own worth. Maybe. Or maybe they're the desires of someone who finally learned what it costs to be taken for granted. 3 days later, I received a call from Daniel. Inmates were allowed to make collect calls once a week, and he had been using his time to check in and share what he was learning about himself and his fellow prisoners. Mom, something happened today that I wanted to tell you about. What happened? There's a guy here, older man, and for embezzlement. He's been trying to get me to help him with some kind of scheme when we get out. Something about using my law degree to help him set up fraudulent businesses. I hope you told him no, I did, but that's not the important part. The important part is how it felt to say no. How did it feel? Easy. Like the choice was obvious. And why do you think that is? Because I finally understand the difference between being smart and being wise. I was always smart enough to figure out how to get what I wanted, but I was never wise enough to understand whether what I wanted was worth the cost of getting it. And now I know that the cost of cutting corners is always higher than the cost of doing things the right way. That's a valuable lesson. The weird thing is I'm actually grateful for all of this, for the arrest, for the jail time, for losing everything, because it forced me to figure out who I really am when I can't rely on money or connections or family reputation. And who are you? Someone who's stronger than I thought. Someone who can handle difficult circumstances without compromising his principles. Someone who understands that respect has to be earned every single day. I'm proud of you, Daniel. Are you really? I'm proud of the man you're becoming. I'm proud of the choices you're making. I'm proud that you're using this experience to grow rather than just survive. When I get out, I want to make amends, not just to you, but to the people I stole from. I want to pay restitution even if the court doesn't require it. How will you do that without money? By working, by earning enough to pay back what I took. Even if it takes years. That's a worthy goal. It's the only goal that matters. I need to prove to myself that I can be someone worth respecting. After he hung up, I sat in my study looking at the family photos that lined the shelves. Images of birthday parties and graduations, family vacations and holiday celebrations. All the milestones of what had appeared to be a perfect family life. But none of those photos captured what I was seeing now, my children becoming people of genuine character, strength, and integrity. The transformation had required destroying everything they thought they knew about themselves. But the people emerging from that destruction were worth the pain of creating them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges for both of them. Isabella would start her new job, taking on responsibilities that would test her newfound maturity. Daniel would continue serving a sentence, learning to navigate a world that didn't care about his former privileges. But for the first time in 30 years of motherhood, I was genuinely excited to see who my children would become. They were no longer the entitled, dependent people I had raised. They were becoming the strong, principled adults I should have helped them become all along. And perhaps most importantly, they were becoming people I would choose to know even if they weren't my children. That was the greatest success of all. 18 months after that first terrible phone call, after being called a pest, after hearing that my own son would rather lose his mother than his sister, I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse apartment overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The view was breathtaking. Waves crashed against the rocky coastline below, while seagulls wheeled through the salt-tinged air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose gold and amber that no photograph could ever capture. I had sold the family home 3 months earlier. The decision had been practical as much as symbolic. The Tudor estate where I had raised my children, where Richard and I had built our life together, had become a monument to relationships that no longer existed. Every room held memories of the people my children used to be, and I found I preferred to remember them as they were becoming rather than as they had been. The sale had been remarkably easy. The house was worth considerably more than I had paid for it 35 years earlier, and the buyer, a young tech entrepreneur, and his pregnant wife had fallen in love with it immediately. "We want to fill it with children," the wife had said during the final walkthrough. "We want it to be a place where family memories are made." I had smiled and wished them well, hoping they would be wiser parents than I had been. The proceeds from the sale, combined with my other investments, had given me the financial freedom to recreate my life entirely. I had chosen this coastal Brookdale specifically because it was far enough for my old life to represent. A true fresh start, but close enough that my children could visit when they chose to. Isabella had been the first to visit the new apartment. She had taken a week off from her management position. She was now overseeing 3 locations and being considered for regional management to help me settle in. "Mom, this place is incredible," she had said, "standing on this same balcony. You can see for miles." That was the point. I wanted to be able to see the horizon. "Symbolic much?" she had teased, but there was warmth in it rather than mockery. We had spent the week shopping for furniture, exploring the neighborhood, and talking in ways we never had before. Isabella had matured into someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with. Thoughtful, funny, and refreshingly honest about her continuing struggles and growth. "Do you miss it?" she had asked on her last evening. "The old house, the old life, all of it." "I miss Richard," I had replied. "I miss the dream of what our family could have been, but I don't miss the reality of what it actually was." And what was it actually? A beautiful performance that none of us understood was hollow until it collapsed. She had nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about the difference between looking successful and actually being successful. And what's the difference? Looking successful means maintaining an image. Being successful means building something real." Daniel had been released from jail 2 months later. I had driven the 4 hours to pick him up, arriving at the county facility on a gray Tuesday morning that felt nothing like the momentous occasion it actually was. He had emerged carrying a paper bag containing his few possessions, wearing the same clothes he had been arrested in, now hanging loose on his thinner frame. But there was something in his posture and the way he carried himself that suggested prison had built him up even as it had worn him down. "Thank you for coming," he had said as we drove away from the facility. "Where else would I be? I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I deserved for you too. You served your time, Daniel. You paid your debt. Now you get to figure out what comes next." What came next, it turned out, was a job at a legal aid clinic helping people navigate the justice system. People who couldn't afford private attorneys and were intimidated by the complexity of court procedures. The work paid a fraction of what he had earned at the prestigious firm, but it provided something his old job never had: a sense of purpose. "I spend my days helping people who are facing the same system that humbled me," he had told me during one of our weekly phone calls. Ex-felons trying to get their records expunged, immigrants dealing with deportation proceedings, people who made mistakes and are trying to rebuild their lives. And how does that feel? Like I'm finally using my education for something that matters. Like I understand why I went to law school in the first place, which was to help people navigate systems that seemed designed to defeat them. I just got distracted for a while by the idea that success meant making rich people richer. Both of my children visited me for the holidays, the first Christmas we had spent together in 2 years. They stayed in the guest rooms of my penthouse, and we cooked together, walked on the beach, and talked late into the evenings about books and politics and their plans for the future. It was the best Christmas I could remember. "You know," Isabella said on Christmas Eve as we watched the sunset from my balcony, "I used to think happiness meant getting everything you wanted. And now I think it means wanting what you've earned. And what have you earned? Peace, self-respect, the knowledge that I can handle whatever life throws at me. Those are valuable things, more valuable than anything I used to think I wanted." Daniel, who had been quietly listening to our conversation, spoke up from his chair near the railing. "I used to think strength meant never having to ask for help," he said. "Now I know it means being brave enough to ask when you need it." "What made you realize that?" "Prison mostly. You can't survive in there without learning to rely on other people and having them rely on you. It's humbling, but it's also liberating, I guess." "Liberating how?" "When you stop pretending you don't need anyone, you can build real relationships instead of transactional ones." As I listened to my children, really listened, in ways I hadn't been able to when I was focused on controlling their lives, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any I had experienced during the years of their apparent success. These were people I was proud to know, not because of what they owned or whom they knew or what images they projected, but because of who they had become when stripped of every advantage except their own character. "Can I ask you both something?" I said, as the last light faded from the sky. "Of course," they said almost in unison. "Do you understand now why I did what I did?" They looked at each other, and some communication passed between them that I couldn't interpret. "We understand that you saw who we really were when we couldn't see it ourselves," Isabella said finally. "And you loved us enough to risk losing us completely in order to give us the chance to become better people." Daniel added, "Do you forgive me?" "There's nothing to forgive," Isabella said. "You gave us the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to discover our own strength, even though it meant destroying the lives you thought you wanted, especially because it meant destroying the lives we thought we wanted," Daniel replied. "Those lives were built on foundations that wouldn't have lasted anyway, and this what we have now, this is real," they said together. The next morning Isabella left to return to her job and her apartment and her carefully constructed life of genuine accomplishment. Daniel departed for his small studio apartment and his work helping people navigate legal systems that had once seemed designed to exclude them. I stood on my balcony, watching their cars disappear into the distance, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt no anxiety about their ability to handle whatever challenges awaited them. They had become people who could survive anything because they had learned to rely on their own strength rather than external support. They had become people worthy of unconditional love because they had learned to earn the respect they once demanded. They had become people I was proud to call my children. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I called Patricia Hamilton. "Victoria," she exclaimed when she heard my voice, "how lovely to hear from you. How are you settling into your new life?" "Very well, thank you. I'm calling because I heard some interesting news about Adrian." "Oh," her voice became cautious. "I heard he's engaged again to the daughter of that pharmaceutical executive from the East Side." "Yes, that's right. A lovely girl from a very good family." "I'm sure she is. I just wanted you to know that Isabella is doing wonderfully as well." "Is she?" "She's been promoted to regional manager for Olivia Park's boutique chain. Quite a success story, really. From part-time sales associate to regional oversight in less than 18 months. How nice for her. And she's seeing someone new as well. A wonderful man she met through her work. He owns a small business and apparently thinks very highly of her work ethic and integrity." "I see. I thought you should know in case Adrian ever asks. It would be terrible for him to think she was still available or still the same person he used to know. Of course, I'll be sure to mention it if the subject comes up." "Thank you, Patricia. I hope you and your family are well." After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and returned to my balcony. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, and somewhere beyond the horizon lay all the possibilities of a life I was finally free to define for myself. I had spent 32 years being defined by my role as a wife and mother, sacrificing my own dreams to facilitate other people's success. The woman who had once planned elaborate dinner parties and charity galas, who had managed household staffs and social calendars, who had lived her life in service to other people's ambitions. That woman had died the day I canceled Isabella's wedding. In her place had emerged someone I was still getting to know, a woman who read books for pleasure rather than to impress other people, who traveled to places she wanted to see rather than places that would photograph well, who chose her activities based on interest rather than social obligation. I had taken up painting, discovering that I had a natural talent for watercolors that had gone unexplored for 60 years. I had joined a book club where the discussions were passionate and genuine rather than performative. I had begun volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping other women rebuild their lives after various forms of devastation. For the first time since Richard died, I felt like I was living my own life rather than managing other people's. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "Thank you for the best Christmas in years. I love you, Mom." A few minutes later, Daniel sent a similar message. "Being with you guys reminded me what family is supposed to feel like. Love you." I smiled and typed back to both of them. "I love you both too, not because you're my children, but because you've become people worth loving." As the sun disappeared completely below the horizon, I raised my wine glass to the infinite darkness of the ocean and whispered the words that had to find this entire journey. So be it, but this time they weren't words of cold determination. They were words of peaceful acceptance, acceptance of the people my children had become, acceptance of the woman I had discovered myself to be, and acceptance of the truth that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is refuse to enable the worst impulses of the people they love most. I had set out to teach my children about respect and gratitude. In the process, I had learned about the difference between love and enablement, between supporting and controlling, between helping and hindering. I had raised children, but I had created human beings capable of building meaningful lives through their own efforts. And perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that the most powerful thing in the world isn't wealth or connections or social position. The most powerful thing in the world is the courage to demand better from yourself, from your relationships, and from the people you love enough to risk losing. My children had called me a pest and told me they would rather lose their mother than show her respect. I had replied, "So be it," and taught them exactly what loss felt like. Now they knew the value of what they had taken for granted. Now they understood that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's destruction disguised as devotion. Now they were people who earned what they had, valued what they received, and understood that respect is something that must be maintained every single day. And now finally, they were people worthy of the unconditional love I had always wanted to give them. The ocean waves crashed against the rocks below, eternal and unstoppable. And I understood that sometimes destruction is simply another word for transformation. Sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is let the old world burn and see what rises from the ashes. Thank you for joining me on Victoria's incredible journey of transformation, revenge, and ultimately redemption. Her story reminds us that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when it means watching people we love face difficult consequences. Victoria's methods were extreme, but her message is universal. Respect is earned, not demanded. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's enablement. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the opportunity to discover their own strength. If this story has resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories of family dynamics, boundaries, and personal transformation to people who need them most. Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about family relationships? Thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck. If you enjoyed this story, please support me by liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much.